Brought to you by Bank of Baroda, India's international bank.
Drop a pebble in the water, just a splash, and it's gone. But there are 100 ripples circling on and on and on. And that's exactly what I feel about Brexit. A ripple that has become a tide, taking with it Prime Minister Cameron to now bringing Snappoll to us. Hello and welcome to Chai Chat with Lavina. I had organized this thinking we'll talk about Brexit, but Snappoll happened. So we start with Snappoll, and I'm so envious of my own panel. I'm so proud to have got a panel in such a short notice to talk about Snappoll, and of course I want to go on to talk about Brexit, what kind of Brexit, and if Britain is finally going to be able to extend its hand beyond EU and have relationships of all sorts. So thank you everyone, thank you so much for joining us. On my right is Lance Foreman, the Salmon King of UK. Find out about him. And next to him is Mr. Dhimant Trivedi, the CEO of Bank of Baroda, one of the biggest in the UK when it comes to the Indian diaspora setup. And for the public point of view, I have the man who's giving us food today, General Manager of Gaylord's. And I bring him also because Brexit was sold to you on the back of chefs. More chefs being here if Brexit happens. And Baroness Sheehan, I'm getting her name wrong constantly, but I will get it right by the end of it. So Baroness Sheehan, who is the foreign spokesperson for Lib Dems.
I'm the international development spokesperson.
International development spokesperson for the Lib Dems. And Mr. Sarosh Zaiwalla, chairman of Zaiwalla.
Not chairman, senior partner.
I call you chairman all the time. You started it. The first Indian to have started solicitor firm in the London Square Mile.
City of London.
City of London Square Mile. And Anand Menon, who have finally grabbed King's College professor of Europe, expert on European studies, but in the UK, leading the biggest think tank on Brexit, the UK in the changing Europe. Thank you everyone for joining us on Chai Chat. Should I open the floor to the question? Snappoll, wise or a gamble? Wise decision or a gamble?
Very wise decision. I think the thing is, people are afraid of change. And in my business, what I've learned over the last 25 years of being involved in my business is that actually change is a good thing. You know, you're on this treadmill day after day and you don't notice the change because it's incremental. And after 20 years, you get back, you step off and you think, how on earth did I get into this situation? But when big change happens, it allows you to step off and reevaluate your whole situation and take advantages. Now, in my business, over the last few years, we had a huge number of really catastrophic challenges. We had a fire followed by a flood and then a compulsory purchase. Every single one of those could have destroyed us, but instead it forced us out of our day-to-day routine. It allowed us to step back, and with each disaster we've turned it into a positive because we were able to get off, reevaluate, and that's how I see Brexit. We've been going down this road for the last 30 or 40 years, and it's allowed us to sort of jolt ourselves off this sort of treadmill, and we can step back and say, is this where Britain should be now, or how can we reevaluate our situation in the world and seize this as a great opportunity? So I think this is a fantastic opportunity for Britain.
Great opportunity. Dhimant, will you take it?
I'm happy to come back to Lance on that. I think it is a desperate gamble. Theresa May is nothing other than her reputation that she's gained over the last few months as being trustworthy. She has, on 5 separate occasions, categorically ruled out having an election, a general election. In fact, her leadership bid was on the promise of no general election until 2020. So she's risking trust in herself, and I think that is for her a huge gamble. And this is the only reason we're having a general election now is because she's lost control in a number of different ways, and she wants a general election now before the Brexit negotiations start to unravel the tissue of lies we were sold on 23rd of June last year, and that is the reason. And of course CPS, 30 Conservative seats are under threat, and she has a majority of how many, Lance?
Is it
12.
politics?
At the moment, 12.
Absolutely.
But it'll probably be about 10 times that on June the 9th.
So is this politics happening at the back of Brexit? But markets haven't really responded badly. Anand, you? Anyone?
I think this is a bit election is a bit of a gamble, for simple reason that we must not forget that 48% of the British population voted against Brexit, and they have an opportunity now to vote for a party like Liberal Democrats or some other party and send them message, because one thing we must realize that
I'll send you a membership.
I'm apolitical, but one thing we must realize that hard Brexit is something which will ignore the wishes of the 48%, and they are going to somehow or the other now have an opportunity to vote against Brexit in an indirect manner. So I think all in all, it's
You
going
think
to be
it's a gamble
It's a
then?
gamble.
I tell you what, I agree with Anand. It's a huge gamble because, you know, we have two polls are nothing. They're, you know, if anything's shown us over the last few elections, that polls go up in smoke, really, and they mean nothing. But the facts are indisputable, and the fact is that just 2 years ago in the general election we had a very narrow Conservative victory, which is being challenged now in the courts potentially, and secondly we had a referendum last June where there was a fine split between the people who wanted to leave and the people who wanted to remain. So yes, and in those circumstances she's taking a huge gamble.
Anand, come in. You are fuming now to say something.
I think it's a very wise decision from her perspective. I
Yes.
think whatever the closeness of the referendum, 71% of the constituencies in England and Wales voted to leave. The Labour Party is in chaos. Theresa May has found a message that seems to resonate. She's on ridiculously good polling numbers. YouGov did a poll a couple of days ago that showed that 69% of the British public want Brexit to happen. So a significant proportion of those who voted to stay have decided, let's just get this out of the way. There's only a small minority now who hanker after, let's try and turn this around. And yes, the polls have been wrong, but the polls are usually wrong. Everyone says the polls were wrong for the Brexit referendum. They were wrong within the margin of error. Polls are giving her a 20-point
When the
lead.
polls are wrong, then we only think of Hillary Clinton and Trump.
But
I
even
think
that
these
wasn't-
days,
but-
that's how far our
But
imagination
no
goes.
poll in recent memory in a developed country's general election has been out by 20 points, and that is the lead she's getting consistently. The final thing I'd say is I suspect that Jeremy Corbyn will do worse than his current polling implies, simply because the Conservative Party have not begun to attack him yet. The clear strategy of the Conservatives for the last couple of years is, let's not be nasty to Jeremy Corbyn because we want him to stay there for as long as possible. Now it's an election, all the videos of the things he said about the IRA, about Hamas, about Venezuela are going to be trotted out, and I would be very surprised if his polling held up.
Oh, really?
Can I just say this?
Yes.
Have you considered about the possibility of Scotland living United Kingdom, and United Kingdom becoming Little England, and the consequences of that?
It's a possibility.
It's a possibility, but it's a very serious possibility.
They're playing with fire.
Yeah, it
Playing
is really
with
playing
fire.
with fire, because I wouldn't want United Kingdom to become Little England.
I think it is a possibility. I don't think the Scots are going to vote to leave in the near future, but we'll see. I think the more serious danger from the Brexit thing is in Ireland, where
Yeah.
ultimately Brexit is going to lead to some sort of border between North and South. Now, I understand that people in India don't get people in England don't get Irish politics.
Before we do, I think I do want to come to Dhimant and say, what is your perspective coming from the...
What I think is that it will remove the uncertainty from the market, coming from the financial market, I will say,
Yes.
and the commercial. It will remove a lot of uncertainty because at present we don't know where the things are moving. One day the pound is appreciating, the next day it is going down by many statements that somebody makes. So, and the faster they move, the better it will be for the economy of the country. That is what I feel.
Samir, now you come from the perspective of you meet so many people, and as a person from the public, how did you feel when she announced that?
Well, I've been listening to these comments and Baroness, and the thing about the Prime Minister going back on her words, like first she was saying there'll be no election. I remember hearing that there was no reason for David Cameron actually to put this referendum. He took a gamble, he thought he would win, he lost, Brexit happened. Now there are things about Scotland leaving. Also they have been saying that Brexit is Brexit, there is no looking back. Now looking at all those things, I just pop up this question, are we moving towards a situation where people are saying move reverse a Brexit because
Oh. Could that be?
because
Lib Dems? Lib Dems? Are you going to pop up that question to the people and play that card to come on?
You know the cards the Lib Dems are playing, and I think it's a very sensible card, which is Brexit means Brexit, but what does Brexit mean? I mean, this is not in the
So there is
dictionary.
a reverse we are talking here.
But what I'm saying is, and I should take up on Anand's points, the reason the country voted for Brexit, but we haven't, but this hard Brexit, this falling off a cliff edge Brexit, is that really what most people who voted Leave wanted? They absolutely, I firmly believe they didn't. And I never, even not for 1 minute, did I think that the Conservative of all parties would turn their backs on the single market. And I think that is disastrous,
No, but
absolutely
I think
disastrous
this
for the
whole
economy.
question of single market, if you don't, if the whole thing was fought on immigration and sovereignty, if there is no free movement, there is no single market. It was the
I'll
understanding
tell you
was
why.
very clear from the start.
Let me finish, Lavina. The reason why I absolutely did not think that Brexit meant leaving the single market was because the Conservative Party manifesto explicitly said that Britain will stay in the single market. Now, it did, absolutely. Yes, I can send that to you.
I really don't understand why people get so hung up about the single market. And I think there's a lot of confusion between being a member of the single market and having access to the single market. Now, America trades with Europe. We trade with America. America is our biggest trading partner, and they're not a member of the single market or the EU. You don't need to have a trade deal to trade, and I think people, the average member of the public doesn't necessarily understand that. You don't need to have a trade deal to trade.
What about
And
tariffs?
tariffs are tiny by comparison. The amount of devaluation we've had of the pound already more than outweighs all the tariffs. The average, the £10 billion that we will save by coming out of the EU, the net 10 billion equates to about a tariff of 7.5%. The average tariffs the EU has the rest of the world are about 3%. We're quids in, or whatever.
All right, I think I've got to
Yes,
take
Alan, go
issue
on.
with this. If we leave the single market and don't have a trade treaty, we will be the only pair of developed nations that are neighbours that rely on the World Trade Organisation rules. Everyone has a trade deal. The Canadians and the Americans do. When you're neighbours, you have a trade deal because you trade more with your neighbours. It's a simple fact of geography.
48%.
The point of the single market is actually nothing at all to do with tariffs. It's about rules. At the moment, let's just say I make widgets in Oxford, okay? I want to sell those widgets to France. The French have to accept my rules because we're all part of the single market. They can't stop me selling those widgets, even though they'd like to, because I'm better at making widgets than the French widget maker, okay? If we leave the single market, the French can just say, actually, you need to be in compliance with our rules that say your widget needs to be a different colour, it needs to be labelled in French, and unless you do that, you can't sell it to my market. All of a sudden, because they've changed the rules, which they couldn't do to me if I'm in the single market, they can obstruct my trade.
I sit on the Lord's EU Select Committee for Energy and Environment, and we've taken evidence on fisheries, we've taken evidence on agriculture, etc. And I can tell you the fisheries industry are really very scared of losing their access to the single market because over 70%, and you will know this, over 70% of the fish that UK fishermen fish is sold to Europe. Now they need access to those markets. Yes, in the long term, maybe we can develop markets elsewhere, but that's not going to happen overnight.
Don't buy those fish anyway. Salmon prices in the
And
last
I
year have gone up 100%.
tell you
and yet
another
it's still
thing.
being
Look at that
sold,
smile.
No, it's not. It's a bad thing for us. Our costs have shot up 100%. But prices move up and down. They will adjust, and markets will adjust around them. These are small, normal business day-to-day fluctuations. This is not the long-term. This is not the long-term issue.
Agriculture, the vice president of the National Farmers Union said to us, before he started to give evidence, he says, most of you will think that farmers voted to leave. He says, we've done a recent poll of our members and they want to remain 60-40. Opinion is shifting, and the reason why is because they've realised, and you will know this because you're in food manufacturing, they absolutely have to have EU labour or they're going to the wall. already farmers are finding it, are wondering where they're going to get the labour, the agricultural workers, to pick this year's harvest because EU workers have stopped coming already.
Okay, yes, Anand, you wind up, and then this is what we're going to take to the next section.
The only thing I was going to say about your 5% figure is there are two things. One, lots of businesses export a good multiple times. That's to say, in the car industry, there are car parts that cross the channel 4 or 5 times while they're being made. Under WTO rules, they would incur a 10% tariff each time they cross that bit of water. That starts getting expensive for car manufacturers. The second thing is, yes, there are loads of, if you look at the West Midlands, there are loads and loads and loads of companies that don't export. But look at the things they make and where they go, and their major client is a major exporter. So you might be making, I've got this widget obsession today, sorry. You might be making widgets, and you might think, okay, I sell my, yeah, I know. Well, I spent too much time with Vince recently, I think. I sell my widget in Birmingham. I really don't care about the European single market. The ultimate customer of your widget might be Jaguar Land Rover, and they want to export that car. If their exports get hit because of the single market rules, Mr. Widget manufacturer is going to get hit because they're going to be buying less of his components. So the 5% can be a wildly misleading figure, I think, in terms of the number of companies that are affected by the export market as opposed to the ones who actually export.
Very quickly, Samir, I think you did speak to me about the Eastern European market and the fact that you, as a restaurant business, face. Do you think you are sad with losing that market, or you think you'll manage? If it does.
Well, losing any market is bad when you do, but I think that you will lose a lot of labor that is coming from
That's what I meant, yes.
from European Union, and the supply will actually push the demand up, which small businesses will be struggling very heavily to cope with.
Will you struggle, you think?
Definitely.
Are you struggling already?
Already.
As the world, I think we've had too much of living with each other. We're becoming rightists all across the world, I think, now. Dhimant ji, can you wind up by saying, how do you see from the...
Well, what I think is that how well they negotiate with the European Union, that is the crux of the matter. Means whether it is hard Brexit or soft Brexit, what concessions you get, what concessions you are willing to give, it all depends on that. So all the conjectures and all the things which we are thinking about may not materialize, and it may be a very good thing also ultimately. Because today Britain is one amongst the 28 partners.
Yes.
Tomorrow it will be on its own.
Yes.
It is not going to bow down to some superpowers as it exists today. And that is what is the feeling which is going on in the country. That is what I am feeling.
Your designation is UK and Europe, isn't it? If Europe is not there, would you have another person there, or you think that you still will treat this as one market?
We can treat it as one market because we, fortunately for us, we don't have branches from the UK in the continent.
Or will you move?
We have branches, separate branches, headed by different people, controlled from one controlling office is here, but that can be easily managed.
So you're not thinking, none of the sectors will think, we can move to...
It's not required for us.
Perfect. Okay, thank you. I have to wind up the first segment. The next segment, I think we do want to talk about negotiation, and will this snap poll lead to a situation where we will be able to negotiate whichever form of Brexit, and what kind of future is UK looking at to have with other countries? So stay tuned on Chai Chat.
Brought to you by Bank of Baroda, India's international bank.